there seemed to be a significant elevation in uh, a disorder called POTS, which is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And this is a kind of poorly understood condition, which has a lot of overlap with other um, poorly understood conditions which have chronic manifestations without much therapeutic many therapeutic tools available. So I'm thinking things like chronic fatigue syndrome, long COVID, and that seems to definitely have risen, and that's a pattern that I think we're seeing across the board. And of course, I see much less of it than say a GP would. Um, and this, not that they are secondary to anxiety disorders, but there's often a close association. And I think that's a theme that emerges when you look at Gen Z, and there's been lots of writing about this, and often quite opinionated writing, which maybe isn't necessarily based on data, about how this is the anxious generation. And I think it's probably not controversial to say that is true. And but it is a bit of a minefield, and there seems to be a lot of very strong opinions and things like that. So it's difficult to tease apart sort of how much is just people reacting with their gut or how much is actually, observed with data.
That's really interesting. And I think that's something that a lot of people have noticed. And particularly, I think GPs have sometimes mentioned that if someone becomes famous online with a certain condition, they can suddenly see a wave of young people with that condition. And so,
Mm.
asking whether they have that condition, that sometimes is a little bit of an invisible condition, a little bit complex to diagnose, um, or whether the child is actually suffering with some level of perhaps wanting connection. I think attention maybe is a bit of a buzzword, but perhaps wanting some sort of connection, some sort of community. And I think there are certainly online forums for people with certain conditions that are more nuanced, where people will often dramatize the situation to perhaps upset and concern others. And then you'll see other groups where they're very positive. For example, you might join